Hello and welcome to another Final Fantasy video. I've said many times that for me, what makes this game special above anything else are the characters. It can be their individual personality, abilities, stories, or their relationships. And among them, today I want to talk about a specific type of relationship, and it's those times when they are relatives. They have a strong fraternal relationship, in some way or another, blood related or not. The focus on established arbitrary rules that I made up to include them is that both characters have to be part of the main group of the corresponding game. Usually this means that they are party members, but it could also include relevant story characters linked to the group despite not actively controlling them. So, these are my 10 favorite family or fraternal relationship between Final Fantasy party members. Palom and Porom are a couple of twin mages from the famous magical city of Mysidia. Porom is the white mage girl and Palom is the black mage boy. They are just a couple of kids, but both are already gifted students and accomplished spellcasters. And as you expect from young twins, their outfit is going to be as similar as they are physically. While Palom wears a striped green and white costume with an orange cloak and green boots, Porom wears a striped orange and white costume with a green cloak and orange boots. The reason I like them to make the list is because they are like the black mage and white mage representation, which at this point they are already like mascots of the series, but turn into actual characters with their story in the world while having a connection between them. But more importantly, it's also how it's portrayed, as their dynamic and contrast between each other is fun. Palom is a show-off. He considers himself a prodigy, and his little bit inflated ego to become a sage and sass towards adults causes Porom to keep him in line, smacking him once in a while, as she is a most respectful and polite individual towards everyone around. It is that twin charm of contrasting but complementing personalities, abilities and even outfits, while matching the more serious stuff, like their twin cast attack and their story decisions. Speaking of, if I want to highlight special moments in the story of them, I have to mention that they first joined Cecil at the request of the Elder of Mysidia. This is important because this is the same place Cecil invaded at the start of the game, which triggered him to start questioning the King of Baron's attitude. And the twin mages are tasked with the orders to not only help Cecil to redeem himself by turning into a paladin, but also to spy on him because this not so fortunate background, and have the job to check on him. In a funny way, given their different personalities, having these two when you yourself are the Final Fantasy representation of a dark versus light path, it's like having a sweet angel in your right ear and a little devilish gremlin in your left one. But the memorable parts come later. During the mission to go back to Baron, now joining Cecil to help him willingly and not spying on him, they have two times where they shine when confronting the king, which is one of the four fiends working for Golbez. Firstly, when meeting Captain Bacon, who attempts to trick Cecil, saying he wants to help, Palom and Porom smell a monster in the area and point him out as the one, eventually defeating him in combat. And after escaping the throne room, with Cagnasso defeated, the walls of the room begin to close in to crush everyone, and that's where the twins both decide to save the whole party by holding off the walls and casting their spell Petrify on themselves. To be part of the walls and let everyone escape, remaining behind as stone. But they are fine, don't worry too much about them. It's actually a short time that they are around, as they both are also feeling the void that White Mage Rosa and Black Mage Rydia can't at this point of the story. Fun fact, they'll appear in the sequel, looking completely different to each other, which is kinda funny when referring to a couple of identical twins. But certainly a reason for you to go like, wait what? What happened to her? So at least it catches your attention. Palom and Porom, the youngest duo in the game, teaching a valuable lesson to all the adults around. Maria from Final Fantasy II is the main heroine of the game, one of the main companions of the protagonist Firion, part of the Resistance and usually a ranger with her bow and arrow. Leon is her brother, also part of the friend group that at the start of the game fell to the Empire and were rescued by the Resistance. With the exception that he was nowhere to be found, so one of Maria's personal motives would be to find him again. They both have some sort of purple toned hair color, and they are both hot, but probably not a very clearly distinctive design that makes you identify them as siblings immediately. There are a couple of special reasons to include them here. As the second game, they fulfill a lot of firsts in the series. Leon will be the first Dark Knight, and anti-hero, a character that serves as antagonist and party member in the same game, while Maria is the first and main female playable character, as she is part of the main crew and not only a guest. But also, as being the first narrative-focused game, the relationship won't be as straightforward and wholesome as you'd hope. All starting because when you found Leon again, it will be as the Dark Knight of the same empire we are trying to take down. And everyone likes a good friends turn into rivals concept, in their case about siblings. Being Final Fantasy II the first one to attempt this narrative and being on the Famicom, moments like this won't be as detailed or explored, but it sets the stage for some dramatic mysteries, revelations, conflict and resolution. Cases like the Dark Knight appearing and Maria noticing something in his voice that it sounds familiar, or when everything seems to be fine with the Emperor defeated, to see Leon arise as the new one, as he believes that power is what could rule the world properly and have to confront him, only for the same Emperor to rise from hell, finding yourself to have an enemy in common that you should join forces instead. And if I didn't say it yet, and probably will repeat many times, I love dramatic bitches in Final Fantasy. Maria and Leon, siblings turned into rivals, joining forces once more against an enemy in common. We are back with the twins segment, in the form of Alphinaud and Alisaie Lebelieu, from Final Fantasy XIV.
If you'll permit me, Alphinaud. And my sister, Alisaie, at your service.
Of course, this being the MMO, there's no party member, but they are both important enough to be a main companion of the Warrior of Light adventures, so I consider them for this list. As you expect, they initially also share similar looks and outfits, but with time and expansions over time, they would branch out into unique looks focusing each other on their own color and slightly different job classes. My personal experience with Final Fantasy XIV is shorter than anyone's, as I'm still going through, but there was one thing that caught my attention while playing a Relm Reborn. These twins, despite appearing in the opening scene and knowing they were going to be important, will have quite different paths. As shown with Palom and Porom, you'd expect twins to be impossible to separate and one's decision is the duo's decision. But here we witness first a small discussion in one scene.
Our grandfather would never entrust the fate of the realm to despots who rewrite history to their convenience. There must be another way to cure what ails this world, and I need to find it.
And after that, they branch out and appear at different points of the scenarios. This also matches their different personalities we are presented with. Alisaie, whose dynamic approach is in stark contrast to that of her more diplomatic brother, will be doing her own thing, that later learn has to do with Bahamut, while we get to meet Alphinaud in an attempt to revive the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, after the massacre at the Waking Suns and the Scions seeming disbandment with that many losses. We are also joined by Sid and his airship at that point, for example. I am more familiar with Alphinaud moments, as he became an active member during the main campaign previously mentioned, but the moments that stand out the most to me involving them have to do with their grandfather Louisoix Lebelieu. Alisaie will be featured in later raids of the game, known as the Binding Coil of Bahamut, while Alphinaud will join in the final coil of Bahamut. The twins learn the truth of their grandfather's transcendence into Phoenix and work together to hold Bahamut back so the Warrior of Light could destroy the Primal's crystal core. In particular, Alisaie's moment is very nice. She leaves a bouquet of flowers in memory of him and the dragons before informing her plans of going on a journey across the realm to find her new path, as she began to understand her grandfather better and sought to continue his legacy of protecting Orsia in her own way.
Alphinaud, Alisaie, if any here should beg forgiveness, it is I.
Of course, I'm sure there's more little moments I could pinpoint involving these twins, but I don't have the personal experience yet and I am excited to learn more about them. Alphinaud and Alisaie, carrying the legacy from the heroes of the past, even when the whole world forgot about them. I am already cheating here, I know. It's a lot of names, but Galuf Baldesion is an older warrior, part of a past generation of warriors that sealed X's death in Final Fantasy V, with his cute granddaughter named Krile, a bright and optimistic girl who shares a few traits with her grandfather and seems to like making light-hearted teases at her companions. While Strago Magus is an older mage, descendant of the ancient Magi in Final Fantasy VI, with his cute granddaughter named Relm, a bright and optimistic girl who shares a few traits with her grandfather and seems to like making light-hearted teases at her companions. See why I think they should share a spot? Granted, the reason to share a spot in my list is because what's fittingly similar is the relationship between grandfather and granddaughter more than anything, not necessarily their individual traits match. Relm is way more sassy, for example. But the sweetest part is how in both cases, they are the only family to each other, as for different circumstances the generation in between is not there, and they truly care for each other. In particular, what I find charming is the moments where is the granddaughter the one to take the lead and take care of their old man instead, using her more youthful energy. And the moments that stand out to me are related to this. Take Galuf and Krile for example. Galuf starts first as a man with amnesia, and only after seeing an interaction between a kid and his grandpa he is able to remember his own. While Krile appears a couple of times to save everyone being a badass, one which allows for the reunion to finally happen, having a very excited and happy young girl, as Grandpa now remembers clearly everything once again. The other time she appeared to save everyone from danger was against none other than X-Death himself, not to mention that during that moment the absolute Chad move that Galuf had in the game, which was taking head-on the main antagonist of the game to save Krile and being clearly motivated purely by the desire to save her, creating one of the most iconic sacrifices in Final Fantasy. On the other side, we have Strago taking care of Relm after her mother passed away and her father has some sort of a complicated past going on, which means he's the surrogate grandfather actually, but taking care of her in a very sweet way, not caring about revealing the town's secret magic abilities if it means to save her from danger. But also, as we mentioned how it's the child taking care of the old man, there's no better moment to showcase that in its full glory than during the best ending credits of all time. When the focus is on Relm, she will take care of her grandpa as he struggles to live by carrying him piggyback so he gets out safely. And in response, once they are escaping Kefka's tower as it crumbles down, he'll take the energy out of nowhere to make the jump to their escape and be able to climb together into the airship. Galuf and Krile, and Strago and Relm. A love between grandparent and grandchild so strong is capable of doing the impossible. Yuna is a summoner on a pilgrimage to stop the monster known as Sin, and arguably you could consider her the protagonist of Final Fantasy X along with Tidus. Rikku is an Alphinaud girl who first appears to us as part of a group, but it's later in the game, after she joins us, that we are told that they are actually cousins. Yuna's mother is an Alphinaud, and sister of Riku's father, Sid. In fact, Yuna's half-green eye is because of the Alphinaud heritage, and it's a common trait among them, as you can see with Riku's eyes. I found their relationship precious because they are basically cousins turned into best friends, which extends not only for this particular pilgrimage that Final Fantasy X covers in its main game story, but also years after, where they are still together and even forming the Galwings in Final Fantasy X too.
Glad to hear it. For a while there, I was starting to feel like a kid. Don't be silly.
I could argue that Rikku cares for Yuna the most, despite the focus on the protagonist couple smooching, or the fact that, well, everyone loves Yuna. And hey, I may be biased, but I was raised with my cousins and 30 years later they are still among my best friends, so there's that. I have a couple of moments that I find very meaningful for them. Rikku first started as part of an Alphinaud group, same group that attempted a couple of kidnapping of the summoners like Yuna, and once at their hideout, it is revealed to us, and Tidus, the reason for that. Yuna, or any summoner, will die sacrificing herself if she performs the final summoning to defeat Sin.
Uni could... but then she... Uni will die, you know? You know, don't you? Summoner's journey to get the final Aeon.
This not only would change an initially unaware Tidus, but it also means that the idea of kidnapping the summoners was to prevent them to go willingly to give their life just for everyone else to enjoy 10 years of calm, which for Rikku turned personal when her own cousin was the one most determined to fulfill her pilgrimage until the end. When Yuna's fate is known for the player, it is Rikku the one always to be against it, and at most stops during the journey as we get close to Samarkand, she'll try to talk Yuna out of it or convince everyone else how we should find another way. Seeing things like that is very sweet. You can feel the desperation in her voice to find an answer and a new way to stop her beloved cousin to die for everyone else. Especially when Yuna hugs her back and thanks her for that treatment. In a bittersweet moment, as by then, to us, it's considered like her farewell already. It doesn't help that we are able to witness her will after it. Of course, the ending will change that fate, but you don't have to know that yet at this point of the game. Also special mention to literally every moment in Final Fantasy X-2, because they are such a mood lifter every time and I love them. Yuna and Rikku, a bond that started as a fraternal connection, but continued for years as best friends. The protagonist of Final Fantasy VIII is Squall Leonhardt, a child soldier from Seed, a group of young mercenaries trained with the final objective of defeating the sorcerer. During this game, there will be multiple sections where you play in dream events from the past, following the adventures of a Galbadian soldier, Laguna Luar, who is Squall's father. Now, here's my very first and more important reason to have them here. Can you believe that this is the only case of a protagonist with a parent that is and remains alive during the whole game? It's a groundbreaking idea already. Unfortunately, his mother Rain didn't have that same luck and passed away close after he was born. You could say that the game at points branches in two segments. The Squall section, which is the main story, and the Laguna one, that happens at points where you revisit the past in a dream. And to be fair, it's kinda impossible not to like Laguna. It feels like a fresh air to go through his events, with his upbeat but also kinda loser attitude. The type of getting cramps attempting to talk to his crush at the time. And besides that, while separately, Squall is able to live the journey of his father through these events, being able to know more about him and his family as a whole, if you include the moments with Rain at Windhill, which at the time probably didn't put much thought into it, but over time when he finally acknowledges who is who, I'm sure he'll have those memories in his heart. The tragedy and irony of Laguna's personal story comes in terms of bad timing. The previously mentioned crush he had could have been reciprocated feelings if it wasn't because he left for a mission that made him start a new life and fall in love with another person called Rain. And after being married, he had to leave their home without knowing his wife was going to give birth to Squall. The reason for that is another key character to mention in this family, Alone, who was a little girl raised by Laguna and Rain, and because of her special powers, was kidnapped by the people at Eshtar that work with the sorcerer Adel. Laguna left to rescue her, and while he succeeded and could send Alone home, he had to stay back because he was needed there to lead the city as the new president, missing out when his wife passed away and that they even had a son. After Rain's death, Alone would be sent to an orphanage along with Squall, who as a kid was always attached to her and considered her as his big sister. So when she ended up leaving, it was a pretty big deal to little Squall, and it would cause his characteristic personality. Which again, as far as I know, is the only case of an older sister to a male playable character, so surprisingly unique dynamics this game has. Also, I am biased again every time I see Squall remembering her big sis, because I have an older sister that I love and can't help but be a softie with Squall despite his grooming personality. Alone is key to understanding the moments that link father and son too, as she is the one that is able to use her mysterious powers to make Squall experience Laguna's past. At first it's on purpose, as she desires to change it, as she considers him her own father too, and wants to make him have a happy life with his wife and learn about his son. But knowing this can't be changed, they eventually proceed with newer plans to defeat the sorcerer altogether. Funny enough, Squall and Laguna meet for the first time at the very end of the last mission, as everything previously were just experiences from the dream world, or the past. The ending cinematic has a very sweet moment of Laguna reminiscing the day he proposed to Rain while looking at her tombstone, and Alone appears to support him, as they can be together again as a father and daughter. and surely Squall wouldn't mind joining in for some family gatherings from that point forward. Squall and Laguna, a father and son that the twisted fate decided to separate, but not even the Final Fantasy protagonist curse could destroy. Okay, we are back with the twins' adventures. This time, we are talking about two brothers specifically. From Final Fantasy VI, the elder Edgar Ronnie Figaro, the king of the Figaro castle and a master engineer or machinist, and the younger Sabin René Figaro. While logically is the prince of this castle, he is more than anything a student of the martial arts, trained under Duncan and mastering his blitz techniques. The most charming aspect of these two is learning their backstory in the game, as during the events of the game, you first find Edgar when visiting Figaro, and only later you meet Sabin as they got separated 10 years ago, despite our idea that twins are closely together most of the time. Edgar, while chivalrous and flirtatious, is a responsible and devoted man to his kingdom with a strong sense of leadership and responsibilities upon his shoulder that he carries pretty well. He has to deal with the Empire after all. While Sabin is more of a free spirit, being more impatient and straightforward, leaving his home to live his own life, tired of the royalty one. When it's about these two, there's an odd sense of camaraderie and complementing each other so well that makes you like this pair as a duo, despite if you like the characters individually or not. With that said, the moment to highlight from them is when you are able to witness that moment in the past when they got separated, when they were only 17. At that time, their father was ill and close to dying, so everyone at the kingdom needed a successor to the throne. While their father's wish was for both of them to be the ones, Sabin had a distaste for the politics of the kingdom and was furious about how no one seemed to really care about his father, but rather his position. So he proposed Edgar to run away and even invite him. Edgar proposed to toss the coin father had given to him and offered to let it decide. The winner would be free to choose whichever path they wanted. This coin of fate would seal the deal. Sabin won and was free to decide his new path, while Edgar stayed to follow the royal life. What he didn't know is that Edgar flipped a two-headed coin, guaranteeing that the younger twin would be free to live either way, as the elder wished to give his brother the life he wanted, assuming the responsibilities of the throne himself, in the most big brother attitude. And to mention once again the best credits ever, they have a very sweet moment between them there too, with Sabin saving Edgar from falling debris and sharing his own insights about the past years. Truly a beautiful sibling relationship. Edgar and Sabin, the twin brothers who live their own life but will always have each other's back. Well, spoiler alert for this list, I'll be talking about beautiful sibling relationship until the end now, because now we have two of the protagonists of Final Fantasy V, Lenna Charlotte Tycoon, the daughter of the King of Tycoon, protector of the Wind Crystal, and her big sister Faris Sherwis, the current leader of the pirates crew, and owner of her sea dragon pet, Sildra. The reason for the different last names and roles or descriptions is because, similarly to the Figaro twins, these two got separated, but not willingly, as Faris' real name is Sarisa Sherwill Tycoon. Does it happen to you that every so often you think about certain characters or things you love, for a little bit you get emotional and attached to them for no apparent reason? That's what happens to me with these sisters. When thinking and playing through Final Fantasy V, my focus is on them and their story that link each other, and how they care for each other as the story goes on. As I've mentioned, these two got separated when they were just children, so in present time they get to meet, as Faris was the captain of the ship we were trying to take to reach the Wind Shrine. Lenna innocently declares herself as the princess to request the use of it, and by noticing that they share the same pendant, Faris decides to tag along and help to understand this better. More often than not, as Lenna's objective is to find her father too, Faris will often be curious and attached to this mission too, and will become overly protective of her during the journey. You'll notice her being the first one to react when Lenna put herself in danger, for example, which she tends to do to save the Windrakes, even before you get to know more about their story with the reveals confirming their relationship. But among the moments to highlight this relationship, there's no better one than a young Sarisa taking care of an even younger Lenna and putting her to sleep after studying Final Fantasy spells diligently, and instead of coming back to her studies, she would fall asleep along her little sister as she shares stories and upcoming plans while also moving the bed so they can sleep together. And that's probably the sweetest thing I've ever seen. But every moment in the game that is about finding out their shared past and true identity of Faris is nice. She can get quite emotional and attached despite her initial demeanor. Moments like watching her father once again and being recognized before he dies, or the moment Lenna, having realized this, refers to Faris as sister, with the pirate denying it and making slightly fun of the idea while running away. These are fantastic and reasons I get emotional. When Faris returned to the throne as a pretty dressed princess, it's quite a cute moment. Although of course we always love her pirate tomboy self. Lenna and Faris. The sisters raised in different environments, but eventually gravitate to each other once again. The protagonist of Final Fantasy XIII is Lightning Farron, an ex-soldier from the Guardian Corps at Cocoon, on a quest to mainly save her younger sister, Serah Farron, who will be not only a source of inspiration for many characters in 13, but have her own game being the protagonist in the sequel 13-2. We have other sisters here, and funny enough, the first picture I saw of both the Farron sister and the Tycoon ones was this fanart, way back when I had no idea what Final Fantasy was even. As I made it clear, I'm a sucker for fraternal relationships in general, so when the main source of motivation and inspiration and the ultimate goal for the protagonist is the safety of her own younger sister, I find it very charming. Which is even more meaningful when knowing their parents die and she has to fulfill that paternal role too. It makes me gravitate towards her. Serah at the start of the game is turned into crystal for eternity as she is cursed being turned into a Lucy, and Lightning's main goal would be to save her and bring her back. That doesn't mean that there won't be some drama in between, as 13 does great in that aspect, with the conflicts within the characters, but with some growth and learnings in between, that motivation will be the ultimate goal, carrying the knife that Serah gifted her for her birthday around as a memento. While on the other side, even if Serah first acted as a driven force for different characters through the course of the main game, like with Snow or even Vanille, in her own sequel we can see her also jumping into action in a way of now it's my turn to help and make my sister proud, with the objective of finding Lightning as she was erased from history basically, and we witness her own point of view and feelings there. They have this dynamic where the younger one looks up to the older one and admires her, but the latter is the one that ends up learning more things from the other because of their distinctive personalities. While there's many moments of them sharing and opening up about their feelings in different parts of the trilogy, it's almost mandatory for me to mention, and spoiler alert to one of the most important moments of the trilogy, the reaction of Lightning to Serah's death, while she was already a knight of the goddess Etro. And I don't think I can stress this enough. We are talking about the overly protective elder sister learning about the death of her younger sister that loves more than anything else in the world. While Lightning mourns her sister's death, her spirit appears and explains she knew of her eventual death, yet continued as she promised not to stop until they were together again and had no regrets. Serah asks Lightning not to forget her and promises they will see each other again, in a pretty dang sad farewell, worthy to showcase the love between them. Lightning will keep Serah's soul with her, sealed up until she is reborn once again as the savior in Lightning Returns, where the god Vunivelse turns Lightning into the savior, with the promise of bringing back Serah in the new world.
If we can laugh together, just one more time. Well, then I have nothing left to wish for.
Which means that will be a mean of manipulation from God. Talk about going far and beyond to save your sister. I mean, things get more complicated, and I could talk about the lore of Fabula Nova Crystallis and Final Fantasy XIII for hours, so we better move on. Lightning and Serah, the sisters with a love so deep for each other, they'll face the Almighty to be back together safely again. Now, before the last one, let me mention some special cases that most of the time involve one of the heroes and a family member who is not exactly an ally in the group, but an antagonist. We have the case of Zidane from Final Fantasy IX and the revelation that given his origins, he's a brother to the antagonist Kuja, and an important reason that made him stay behind at the very end, and not leave him alone, for example. In a similar fashion, at the later stage of Final Fantasy IV, we discover that Cecil is a Lunarian and brother of the main antagonist of the game, Golbez. Now, I'm not a fan that just because it's been revealed to you that you are blood related, you have to immediately feel soft and forgiving towards the bad guy, but there's some mind control here and there, so it's fine. In a more dramatic fashion, Final Fantasy X Tidus learns mid-game that the big monster that terrorizes the world is actually Jecht, his father who disappeared ages ago. And with the fact that while together there wasn't clearly the best of relationships, it allows for some bittersweet revelations and resolutions. If tension is what we wanted, then there's the case of the twin brothers from Final Fantasy XII, Basch and the judge Gavranth, which at points has as main antagonist status as Vayne. Contrary to the twins we talked about here, the coolest thing about them is how they replace each other at different times. At the start, Gavranth killed Dalmasca's king, making it seem like it was Basch the one betraying the kingdom, while at the end, Basch took the role of the judge that serves the House Solidor family to keep peace between nations. A nice closure there in that sense. And then there's the special case of Ramza Bolv, protagonist from the spin-off Final Fantasy Tactics, which is its own special case of a family drama from the Wolves. You have his older brother Dicedark, who serves as one of the villains because of his thirst for power, and even kills the other brother Salvag in this conflict, while also his younger sister Alma, who he loves dearly and is a big source of inspiration through the entire game, as she is even used by the final boss. So there's a lot of content from them alone to write a soap opera. But now we talk about the last spot. I have to finish with the more recent one. The protagonist Clive Rosfield from Final Fantasy XVI, who started as the guardian of his younger brother Joshua Rosfield, who was chosen as the dominant of fire from the icon Phoenix. With this power, Joshua gave his older brother the blessing of the Phoenix, becoming his first shield, and allowing him to use fire powers. Did I mention how much I love when the protagonist's main motivation is the well-being of their sibling? Well, in Clive's case, it works even better, because the amount or lack of knowledge about his brother's fate and later reveals that makes it a roller coaster of emotions to this guy, adding more to it already. For starters, Clive is just the perfect big bro, supporting his little brother when he feels weak or struggling with his role and the pressure that it conveys being the dominant of fire, not judging him for anything and making him feel at peace. Which hurts even more, how in the first chapter, the twisted fate decided to put the two siblings against each other, ending up in the worst of tragedies. A berserk Clive turned into Ifrit apparently murdered Joshua in his phoenix form. Or so we thought, but while we discovered that little Joshua wasn't cruelly killed by Clive turning into Ifrit, the fact remains that Clive spent 13 years thinking about that event, with less or more detail, to the point that it was his only reason to live. To find revenge to his little brother murderer, without even realizing he was at fault. So he also has to deal with finding out about this detail, which one could assume it's pretty harsh. Also, I should say I always loved how expressive they both are when it's about telling how much they love one to another and how grateful they are to have the other as a brother. Usually, characters don't voice much feelings like that in games especially, as you don't have the luxury of being able to read 4 paragraphs of thoughts and descriptions, so I appreciate that about them. If I have to stick with a couple of moments or scenes, the ones to definitely include is their actual reunion, after the dramatic tragedies previously mentioned, with a gap of 18 years to finally meet each other. So it's both expected and nice to see them finally having their comfort in each other knowing they are together. And the other, to go back to their younger days, is how softies they were during those times. I've mentioned how Clive supported Joshua as the other one, knowing the responsibilities that the dominant of Phoenix has to deal with, and the latter didn't hesitate to seek comfort and reassurance on his idol and now shield of Rosaria. Again, them expressing like that is the sweetest thing. Also a couple of tragic moments too, but let's pretend it's all good, to end on a nice tone. All around, with all the ups and downs, the reunions and farewells, and given that they are the new fresh addition to the series, I think they are fitting for the first spot here. Clive and Joshua, supporting and staying together until the very end in a world filled with betrayal. But share with me who's your favorite fraternal relationship in the series. I've talked about characters linked to playable parties, but there's way more connections, like parents and their young children, not yet at age to throw out there to fight God, for example. And also, I have to mention that blood relationship doesn't really have to be the only way to be a family, as Final Fantasy and games with parties in general can be very good at the concept of found families. A bunch of people from different places and backgrounds, outlaws or not, coming together to experience such things that would make a connection between them for their whole life. Such are the cases, in my opinion, of the whole Final Fantasy VI group and the Final Fantasy VII one. Thank you very much for watching, enjoy some Final Fantasy and I'll see you around. Love you!